Hello everyone and welcome back to the 3T Path channel. My name is Giridhari and welcome back to our Uddhava-gita course. Now we have started a new chapter, wonderful chapter, where Krishna is describing to Uddhava Jnana Yoga, the power of Jnana Yoga. It's such an important, fundamental topic of yoga. Krishna always emphasizes right away the power of Jnana Yoga, because that's the idea of the path of yoga, that you will get this knowledge, and with this knowledge you will be able to access higher states of consciousness. You'll be able to access ultimate reality, going beyond the illusory, ephemeral, material surface reality. You'll go beyond all this with the power of knowledge. So Jnana Yoga is essential for you to get into the right frame of mind and then start practicing and living your life according to what's true, what's real, what's most important to the real you, starting with understanding who the real you is. So very important topic. And of course, if you want to watch all the previous classes, we already have over 110 classes in this Uddhava-gita course. All the previous classes you can access just by becoming a member of this channel, and then check out here the description of the video. You'll see how to do that, and then you go to Uddhava-gita.com where you can see the whole course laid out nicely for you. Okay, so we are now in the 11th canto, 19th chapter, verse 12. And what's going to happen now is that Krishna is going to give us a brief description of what Bhismadeva described to the Lord, what he taught Yudhisthira in the battlefield of Kurukshetra. So after the Battle of Kurukshetra, where the Bhagavad-gita was spoken, the Bhagavad-gita is spoken just before the battle, and the battle rages on. Oh, if so many people die. And then Bhisma, who was the commander of the opposing army, he was the commander for Duryodhana. So, but he's been shot at so many times. He's completely covered in arrows, as you can see in the cover of this video. So he's completely shot up with arrows. And he's lying there, completely shot up in arrows. But he had the power to choose when he would die. And so he chose, and he wanted to wait the right moment, and Krishna was there, and he wanted to help the Pandavas with some knowledge, sharing his wisdom. So he was withholding his moment of death by his will, because he had that power. So he was withholding his moment of death, and he's teaching the Pandavas, especially Yudhisthira. He's teaching Yudhisthira, who's going to be the emperor, all these things about dharma. So it's a huge section of the Mahabharata. But Krishna is just going to tell Uddhava here a short section of that, where Bhisma spoke specifically about moksha, about liberation. So he's going to share this jnana on liberation with Uddhava here, because Krishna was right there in front of Bhisma hearing all this. So this is how it goes. This is verse 12. Krishna is speaking to Uddhava. When the great battle of Kurukshetra had ended, King Yudhisthira was overwhelmed by the death of many beloved well-wishers. And thus, after listening to instructions about many dharmic principles, he finally inquired about the path of liberation. So this is, Yudhisthira was, of course, traumatized. Well, he would be, right? Anybody would be. Profound PTSD, because it was such a horrific battle. Millions of people had died, and of course it was very complicated because they had died. They were like the cousins fighting. So Yudhisthira was literally fighting against people he knew his whole life. His brothers and cousins, and not brothers, but his cousin. Well, Karna was there as well. So yeah, his brother, cousins, uncles, his grandfather Bhishma was. So yeah, it's a terrible scene. So he was deeply traumatized. He was deeply affected, and he wanted to hear instructions on dharma so he could get over it. And that's why Bhishma was hanging around, so he could tell him these things. Verse 13. I will now speak unto you those dharmic principles of Vedic knowledge, detachment, self-realization, faith, and devotional service that were heard directly from the mouth of Bhismadeva. So Krishna is just going to say, look, I'm going to tell you what Bhismadeva told Yudhisthira. Verse 14. I personally approve of that knowledge by which one sees the combination of 9, 11, 5, and 3 elements in all living entities, and ultimately one element within those 28. So you'll see this once in a while. You have these verses with all these numbers. You're like, what are they talking about? What is this? 9, 11, 5, 3, 1, 28. What's all this? And of course, this all goes back to sankhya, to the philosophical path of sankhya. It's very central to yoga, to Vedanta, to general Indic philosophy. And sankhya literally means enumerate, count. So the idea was that you would understand reality, the world, life, by counting, enumerating the basic elements of reality. It was a way of like, let's classify reality. So we don't get confused like, oh, this whole thing, what's it? Okay, well, let's start breaking it down. So that's what sankhya is. And then you have these different lists, and that's why you have all these numbers, 9, 11, 5. But let's look now in the purport, and we'll see how this works. The 9 elements, so the first number he mentioned was 9. The 9 elements are material nature, the living entity, the mahatattva, the false ego, the 5 objects of perception, namely sound, form, touch, taste, and aroma. That's why you get 9. Okay, so that's the 9. It's just, again, it's just a way of dividing different places, dividing different ways. And even Krishna here in the Uddhava-gita, he'll give like different versions of sankhya. It's just like, because you can classify things in different ways. So these are the 9. So again, the living entity, the mahatattva, the totality of energy, the ahankara, the false ego, the ahankara from which, where you begin in sankhya, one thing derives to the other thing. So from ahankara is like a major starting point for all the other aspects of reality. And then the 5 objects of sense perception: sound, touch, form, taste, and aroma. So they separate these. And then you're going to have also the 5 objects of perceiving these 5 objects of sense perception. The 11 are the 5 working senses. Again, so what's gonna make, or the 11 are the production, how the living entity interfaces with materiality. So it's divided like this: the 5 working senses, and I did a separate video of this on the channel. I'll leave a link for it here in the description of the video, where you can see where these 5 senses of perceiving knowledge and the 5 working senses are described. So the 5 working senses: the voice, hands, legs, anus, and genitals. So with these things, you do stuff in the world. Plus, and here are the 5 knowledge acquiring senses. So you have the ears, touch, eyes, tongue, and nostrils. So of course these go with the sound, touch, form, taste, and aroma, right? You have these senses which can perceive these sense objects. Okay, so the 11, we did the 5 working senses, and then the 5 knowledge acquiring senses, and there's one more, along with the coordinative sense, the mind. So the mind is the 11th sense. Sometimes it's the 6th sense, but not in the way that we use in the West. But just because of this list, it's the 6th sense in terms of the 5 knowledge acquiring senses. Then you have the 6th sense. So those are the 11. So Krishna says, one who sees the combination of the 9, the 11. So you've done these 2 numbers. The next number is 5. So what's the 5? The 5 elements are the 5 physical elements. So this is the Mahabhutas. So we have here earth, water, fire, air, and it's called sky because it's a translation. It just means, another translation is ether. It just means the space. So what's, these are easy, right? Well, when we say earth, water, fire, air, and sky, a very nice translation of it in more scientific modern terms are solids, liquids, radiating energy, gases, and space. So like just if like what's between this hand and this hand? Oh, there's air. No, but what if I was in a vacuum? Okay, that thing, that's what they call sky, ether, space. It's just like just what's in between two things, and without worrying about what's actually there, like if you're in a vacuum or whatever, if you're out in space. So that is called sky. So those are the 5, right? And Krishna says in Bhagavad-gita chapter 7, he says, look, I make these 5 and I also make the 3. So the list here was the 5 and the 3 elements. What are the 3? The 3 are in the subtle body. And again, in the same video that's linked down here in the description of the video, you can see that as well, the 3 aspects of your subtle body. So the 3 are the 3 elements of material nature: goodness, passion, and ignorance. So you can do that like that. So which are the basic components of all reality. And with these basic components of reality, 5 and 6, then you can also get mind, intelligence, and false ego, which is not listed here, but Krishna lists in the Bhagavad-gita in chapter 7. So he says the 5 Mahabhutas and these 3 subtle elements of material nature. Here Ahankar already came up in the first list of the 9. Okay, so those are the 9, 11, the 5, and the 3 elements in all living entities. That's a lot, right? So we went through all those in different ways of arranging these elements. And so can you imagine having, like, if it's going to be on the test, if I was like a teacher the old days, and it's going to be on the test, you have to memorize these things. You don't have to memorize these things. It's not that important. Honestly, not that important. It's just a general idea of how it works and be curious about it. I don't find sankhya to be that important. It's, it's okay for you to understand things, but just a general idea is good enough. If you just heard it, fine. You don't have to like, oh, well, which one was it? Because again, they do it in different orders and in different ways. Okay. All living entities, from mighty Lord Brahma down to the insignificant weed, manifest material bodies composed of these 28 elements. The one element within all 28 is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the Super Soul, who is all-pervading within the material and spiritual world. So then Krishna says, let's read the verse again. I personally approve of that knowledge by which one sees the combination of 9, 11, 5, and 3 elements in all living entities, and ultimately 1 element within those 28. So if you add up 9 plus 11 is 20, plus 5 is 25, plus 3 is 28. So he says, I approve of that knowledge by which one sees the 1 element within these 28, which is him, the Super Soul, God. A bit complicated. Yeah, it was, but you get the idea, I hope. One can easily understand that the material universe is composed of innumerable causes and effects. Since Lord Krishna is the cause of all causes, all secondary causes and their effects are ultimately non-different from the personality of Godhead. In other words, the buck stops with God. So God starts everything, he's the cause of all causes, so whatever else happens, it all goes back to God. This understanding constitutes real knowledge, or jnana, which is essential for perfecting one's life. So the idea of sankhya is that as you analyze everything, what are you going to get down to? You're going to get down to the understanding of the soul and God. And all the different, you'll be able to separate things enough by enumerating things like, okay, so the body is actually made of these 5 elements plus these 3 other subtle elements. Okay, but then there's something else. There's the soul. Ah, okay, so that's different. Oh, and then there's God and present in every. So then you understand by analyzing the world, you can like separate this and get down to the basics of the basics, which is God. Verse 15. When one no longer sees the 28 separated material elements, which arise from a single cause, God, but rather sees the cause itself, the personality of Godhead, at that time, one's direct experience is called vijnana, or self-realization. So we saw this term vijnana earlier in the chapter. We had jnana, vijnana. Jnana, just the knowledge. I just read you the list. This is the list of sankhya, 28 elements plus God. So that's knowledge. And maybe, even if you could memorize it and write them down, that's knowledge. But what if you really manage to absorb that knowledge and really perceive reality according to that knowledge? So you really like, I get it. I'm actually feeling it. I'm experiencing it. I'm seeing the world like this. I can really see the 28 elements and then the cause, God. So then when you really get it, that's called vijnana. So it's no longer just knowledge. Yeah, you could write it down. I don't know what they're talking about, but I can write it down. I know the knowledge. It's different from, no, I'm living the knowledge. I'm experiencing it. So that's vijnana. So they have these two terms, jnana, vijnana. So of course, we get all this jnana. That's what I tell my students. All this knowledge you get. Not only, this, sankhya, but all the knowledge you get, even the knowledge about God and the kingdom of God, and all this knowledge is jnana. It works as a password. It's like here's the website, here's the password, and now you can access. So this is all knowledge. Now you can access that reality directly with your consciousness. That's what we're doing here in this path of yoga, in this path of Bhaktivedanta. We are using this knowledge to unlock our direct experience of soul, of God, self-realization, of God realization, of understanding the ultimate kingdom of God, God, a relationship, brasa, everything we're going to access with this knowledge. So the knowledge, okay, you got the knowledge. It doesn't stop there. The knowledge is just your passkey, your password to be able to directly access this stuff. That's how it works. That's why it takes a little time. It's not enough just to okay, watch the video, I got it. No, I read the book once. No, Gita, like the Bhagavad-gita, Uddhava-gita, Bhagavad Purana, these aren't books where you're okay, you pick up some thriller and you read it. Okay, that was fun. And you discard it and you just leave it back in the hotel or something. No, it's not like that at all. Because this jnana, you have to get it so well so that you have access to it. So then, it's so deeply ingrained, you understand it so clearly that now it can work in its true function as a passkey, as an access code for you to access your own self and God and the kingdom of God. So, at that time, one's direct experience is called vijnana, Krishna says. Purport. The difference between jnana, ordinary Vedic knowledge, and vijnana, self-realization, can be understood as follows. A conditioned soul, although cultivating Vedic knowledge, continues to identify himself to some extent with the material body and mind, and consequently with the material universe. In trying to understand the world he lives in, the conditioned soul learns through Vedic knowledge that the Supreme Personality of Godhead is the one supreme cause of all material manifestations. He comes to understand the world around him, which he accepts more or less as his world. As he progresses in spiritual realization, breaking through the barrier of bodily identification, and realizes the existence of the eternal soul, he gradually identifies himself as part and parcel of the spiritual world, Vaikuntha. At that time, he is no longer interested in the personality of Godhead merely as the supreme explanation of the material world. Rather, he begins to reorient his entire mode of consciousness so that the central object of his attention is the personality of Godhead. Such a reorientation is required since the Supreme Lord is the factual center and cause of everything. A self-realized soul in the stage of vijnana thus experiences the personality of Godhead not merely as the creator of the material world, but as the supreme living entity existing blissfully in his own eternal context. As one progresses in one's realization of the Supreme Lord in his own abode in the spiritual sky, one gradually becomes disinterested in the material universe and ceases to define the Supreme Lord in terms of his temporary manifestations, which means like you become ever more disinterested, detached from this ephemeral surface reality of the material world, and ever more interested and focused in the Lord himself, in his leelas, in the kingdom of God, in God's abode. You become ever more focused in that true reality because you know that that's true, that's the ultimate reality. This is not, this is just an illusion, this is temporary, ephemeral. So you become focused on what's real. A self-realized soul in the stage of vijnana is not at all attracted by objects that are created, maintained, and ultimately destroyed. So a vijnana person not interested in this temporary manifestation anymore because he's focused on the eternal things. The eternal connection, the love, the feelings, the rasa, in God's eternal abode, God who is of course eternal. He just focused on the real things and not the temporary, ephemeral, changing things of the material world. The stage of jnana is the preliminary stage of knowledge for those still identifying themselves in terms of the material universe. Whereas vijnana is the mature stage of knowledge for those who see themselves as part and parcel of the Supreme Lord. So that's a nice summary, right? Jnana, you're still like here, you're still identified with the body, with the universe, and then you get some jnana. But then vijnana, no, now you identify yourself as part of an amsa, Krishna says, a spark of God, and of course a servant of God. You understand that your purpose as a individual spark of God is to serve the whole, to serve God. That's when you truly yourself, and then you're truly happy and blissful because you're situated in reality with God as the center of all existence. Very nice explanation. Verse 16. Commencement, termination, and maintenance are the stages of material causation, which is just a complicated way of saying things start, they stay, and then they end, right? There's no house, and then the house is built, the house is maintained, and at some point the house is destroyed. You know, the sun was created, the sun stays, and one day the sun's gonna go out. and the whole universe. So where everything starts, maintains, gets destroyed. So commencement, termination, and maintenance are the stages of material causation. That which consistently accompanies all these material phases from one creation to another and remains alone when all material phases are annihilated is the one eternal. That's like a very nice poetic way of saying it. Okay, so all these things, right, you can look around you, and some things are more obvious. They come to being, they stay a little bit, and they disappear. You know, like take like perishable food. You know, like food's grown and then it's gone. And so you can see it in a little larger scale. You know, houses and buildings and cities and bridges, and so and then, you know, on a cosmic scale, we see like exploding, you know, supernova. You hear about it, it's like, that's like a star that exploded. So it was like, you know, it started, maintained, poof, it's gone now. So things get destroyed. So you're seeing this in a small level, on a regular level, a cosmic level. Those things are created, maintained, destroyed, created, maintained, destroyed. And of course your body, created, maintained, destroyed. Everything is like this. But what is that thing which is there during creation, maintenance, and destruction? And then when something else gets created, maintained, and destroyed, and something else gets created and destroyed, and it's like over and over, what is that thing which is always there? Is the one eternal. So of course, we're going to go beyond matter. We're going to go to God. God is there when anything gets created. God is there when anything gets maintained. God is there when anything gets destroyed. And you, as a spark of God, you also, like take your bodies, you know, your bodies get created, maintained, destroyed, and then you're still there. And then you go into another body which is created, maintained, destroyed. And then you went to another body created, maintained, destroyed. And you keep going, and you're the same you. Reincarnation, you're going through, transmigrating through these bodies, and you're the same you. You haven't changed. It's one of the things Krishna speaks about in chapter 13 of Bhagavad-gita, which is the Sankhya chapter of Bhagavad-gita. The Sankhya Yoga is explained in chapter 13 in a different way than we saw, but you know, similar idea. But what Krishna emphasizes there is like, look, you are unchanging. God is unchanging. Everything else is changing. So that's how you use this knowledge to separate, to get to Vijnana, is by analyzing that, oh, all material energy is constantly changing. This is something, you know, scientists will agree with. So material energy is constantly in flux, right? Everything is kicking around, the little atoms, things are changing, decomposing. Nothing stays. Nothing isn't like, oh, it stayed. No, everything is moving around and changing. So what's that thing that's not changing? What's the thing that's staying the same? Immutable. So that's consciousness. That's you and God. Those are immutable. So that's a way of like, oh, everything's changing, but something's staying the same. So why don't I focus on what's staying the same? Because that's real. Everything else, that's when we use the word illusion, it's always in that sense. Illusion because it's changing, not because it doesn't exist. The Vedas aren't saying that, oh, your body doesn't exist. It's an illusion. It's like a, you know, like a magician thing, or like a, no, it's real. It exists, but it exists temporarily. It's changing all the time. And even like, you know, as a completely like you didn't have your body, you know, 100 years ago, and for 100 years from now, you're not going to have your body. So and in that sense, it's illusory. It's not like the ultimate thing, like something else has to be there. But you have existed. You were there 100 years ago, and you'll be here 100 years from now. Not in this body, but you will exist unchanged. So that's how it works. Purport. The Lord here reiterates that the one Supreme Personality of Godhead is the basis of unlimited material variety. So material variety, unlimited, right? Everything, so many things, changing, creating. But what's behind all that? God. Material activity is a chain of cause and effect relationships by which innumerable objects are produced. A particular material effect is converted into a subsequent cause, and when that causal phase is terminated, the effect disappears. Fire causes firewood to burn to ashes. And when the causal function of fire is finished, the fire itself, which was the effect of a previous cause, is also terminated. The simple fact is that all material objects are created, maintained, and ultimately annihilated by the supreme potency of the Lord. When the entire field of material cause and effect is withdrawn, so that all cause and effect relationships vanish, the personality of Godhead remains in his own abode. Because of course the idea, the Vedic concept is that the entire, and it's what Sankhya talks about, the entire universe is created in one cause, one effect, cause and effect, and then you have this whole universe, and then everything gets terminated at some point and retracts back into God. And so then there's only God. And then from God again, all the universes, because it's billions of some simultaneous universes happening, all the universes come out, and then they all come back. So everything is created, and then the cause and effect chain is terminated. You only have God, and then God expands everything, collects everything, expands, collects. So what's always there? God. God is there before, at the beginning, at the maintenance, at the termination, and beyond creation, maintenance, and termination. It's always there. Only the personality of Godhead is the absolute cause. Similarly, although material things may exist, they do not always exist. The personality of Godhead alone has absolute existence. By the process of jnana or knowledge, one should understand the supreme position of the Lord. So this is the idea. It's a very, very high level class today, right? Very high level philosophical concepts. Hope I didn't twist your brain too much, but it's wonderful to it's nice, isn't it? To think about these great things, deep philosophy, to spark your spiritual knowledge and to spark and then your spiritual life in bhakti. So I hope you enjoy that. Have your rest of your day with lots of peace and lots of love. Hare Krishna.